You hear news of your next-door neighbor vanishing without a trace. It was an unremarkable Tuesday when the news came. The morning paper was delivered as usual, its edges crisp, with the chill of dawn. But instead of the usual updates on local events and mundane headlines, a brief and jarring notice caught my eye. Mysterious disappearance of local resident. Authorities seek information on neighbors vanishing. The article was sparse. No names, no details, just a mention that a neighbor had vanished without a trace. My curiosity piqued. I glanced over at the house next door, the same one I'd seen every day for the past 3 years. Its curtains were drawn tight, and the lawn, usually manicured, had started to grow wild. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gray, was a reclusive woman in her late 60s. I'd only ever seen her a few times, usually shuffling to and from her car with a distinct air of solitude. Her absence now felt unsettling, but it was her mystery that gnawed at me. As the days passed, the story in the paper grew colder. No one spoke of Mrs. Gray, and the police made no headway. The front door of her house remained unopened, the mailbox overflowing with uncollected letters. It was as if she had simply dissolved into thin air. One evening, driven by an uneasy mix of curiosity and worry, I decided to visit Mrs. Gray's home. The setting sun painted the sky a deep orange, casting long shadows across the street. I approached the house, the creak of my shoes on the cracked sidewalk sounding unnervingly loud in the silence. The front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. The chill in the air seemed to deepen, and an inexplicable feeling of dread washed over me. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was as I'd remembered, dusty, with furniture draped in white sheets. The silence was thick, almost oppressive. I moved through the rooms, calling out softly, "Mrs. Gray, are you here?" My voice echoed eerily in the empty space. In the living room, a large, ornate mirror hung over the fireplace. It was covered in a thick layer of dust. I wiped it clean, revealing my reflection, pale and uneasy, standing alone in the shadowy room. As I stared at myself, I noticed something strange. Behind me, in the dim light, I thought I saw a figure standing in the hallway, just out of sight. I turned around quickly, but the hallway was empty. My heart pounded in my chest. I decided it was time to leave, but as I turned back toward the door, I noticed something else. The shadows seemed to stretch and writhe, almost as if they had a life of their own. I hurried to the front door, but it slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping me inside. Panic surged through me. I tried the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. My breaths came out in ragged gasps as I searched for another way out. Then I heard it. Soft, mournful whispers coming from somewhere within the house. They seemed to be calling my name, pleading, almost as if they were lost souls trapped in the walls. I followed the sound, each step heavier than the last. It led me to the basement door. I hesitated, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. With trembling hands, I descended into the dark, musty basement. The stairs creaked under my weight, each step amplifying my fear. At the bottom, I was met with an unsettling sight. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and boxes, but what caught my attention was a large, tattered book lying open on a wooden table. The pages were filled with strange symbols and sketches of dark, monstrous shapes. The air felt colder here, and the whispers were now a cacophony of urgent, unintelligible murmurs. I turned away from the book, feeling an oppressive presence. Suddenly, I saw her, Mrs. Gray. She stood in the corner of the basement, her face pale and hollow, her eyes dark voids. She was staring directly at me, her mouth moving silently as if trying to say something, but no sound emerged. Before I could react, the shadows in the room converged, enveloping her in a swirling mass of darkness. She vanished, leaving nothing behind but a chilling silence. The whispers stopped abruptly, and I was left alone with my pounding heart. I fled the basement, the door slamming shut behind me. I burst out of the house, gasping for breath, and ran to my own home. The police were called, but they found nothing. No sign of Mrs. Gray, no evidence of my visit. They assumed I had been imagining things. Now, each night, I hear the whispers in my own house, calling my name from the shadows. I see fleeting glimpses of Mrs. Gray's hollow eyes in mirrors and reflections. I know she's not gone. She's somewhere in the darkness, waiting. And I fear that one day, those whispers will grow too loud, and the shadows will reach out for me.